everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. The date is May 23rd, 2024. It's exactly 5 p.m. where I'm at right now. We are continuing the reading of Cyber Racism by Jesse Daniels. This book was published back in 2009. It covers many different aspects of white supremacist activity online and the history of it, and how different communities within the white supremacist online sphere operate and interact. I find this book very pertinent to my life as a person who is a digital creator online. I often do these streams. I've been talking about my experiences about what it's like to be Black abroad and stuff like that. I'm always online. I work as an online English teacher. The internet is a part of my life, and I believe the internet is a public space that all people should be allowed to be on and not face racial harassment. We should not think it's normal. We should not validate it. We should not allow it to continue to permeate and uh, um, proliferate online, because everybody deserves to be able to be in the public space, the global unified public square, which is the internet. All right, so I'm only going to be on live until about 6:45 p.m. my time, because I have to go back to work. I have an English class with my Russian that I got to talk to after this. No, I am not getting orders from the Kremlin. For anybody who thinks Simon out here is working on behalf of Putin, no, I am not. I'm just got to talk to some Russians because, hey, everybody wants to learn English. Anyway, my guy Nelson Moreno jumped into the comments. He said, Simon, how much for you to cover a book that I recommend? Also, social issue book. You don't have to ask me to. I will not be paid to read something. I like to learn, and I'm glad that they are recommending books. Please recommend books. The movie reviews will come back, but I also want to react to some books as well, right? The books take more time, of course, to do, but they will get done, because we're right in the middle of this book, Cyber Racism. But please send your book recommendation in the chat. Send it to me on Twitter. Everybody can reach me on X. I will put this in the chat right now. Follow me on X. My handle is Laji, Laji Amriki, Amriki. Follow me on Twitter. Let's get the discussion popping. Let's do some spaces and stuff like that. So Nelson Moreno said, of Boys and Men. I hope that book is not bussified. I'm joking. It's probably a very good book, probably very relevant. I want to read more material, but the material that I want to read will mostly be related to Black life, Black men, issues related to white supremacy, fighting white supremacy, and things like that. So, yeah. All right, Nelson, thank you for the recommendation of Boys and Men. You got to send the author too, because of Boys and Men is broad. There might be like 20 different books with that title. So make sure you send the author as well, so I know exactly where to find it and look it up. But this is the book that we're reading right now. This is part 4 of our series. We're actually behind. I hope to finish the series by today, Thursday, but we're only on chapter 5. And this is a 10 chapter book. So we still have half of this book to go, but we're on page 100. So we've made progress. This was written by Jesse Daniels. You can find it on Amazon for the humble price of only $48.68. And if you need a hookup on books, holla at me, because I got it. All right. Nelson Moreno jumped into the comments. He said, it's about men mostly, but also Black men. Author is named Richard Reeves. Shout out to Nelson. The live chat is saved, so I will look that back up. I will try to get that book, and I might read that as well. Thank you, Nelson, for that. But yeah, in our last reading of this book, in our last session, class, whatever you want to call it, we were talking about white women who are actively a part of the white supremacist sphere online, specifically Stormfront. And in the chat, we had a very interesting discussion about gender and relations between men and women. And that caused a lot of discussion, a lot of attacks from different people. I'll actually read one of the comments that somebody left under the video. All right. His comment got approved. And this guy is Mob Eternal 3751. And he says, you are making mistakes when you compare white supremacy and racism with the quote unquote patriarchy and sexism. Your argument against the idea that men are not a hive mind was comparing the shared behaviors and ideology of white supremacy. I said that he said that He's saying that I said men are not a hive mind, when I say, by and large, men do operate on a hive mind because a lot of us react to women in similar ways across cultures. Of course, it's not copy and paste from culture or place, but I say that by and large, men do react to women in a oppressive way in many different cultures. It might not be every individual man, but systemically, men do act against women oppressively. But yeah. But treatment of women by men differs much across socioeconomic status, culture, religion, etc. Yes, I would say it is different. Of course, being a woman in Saudi Arabia is different than being a woman in Sweden. But by and large, women in Sweden and women in Saudi Arabia both face sexism, both face domestic partner violence. Both women in both countries have lower job market opportunities and things like that, lower opportunities to succeed in the workforce, succeed in education, and things like that. There is no mistake that the richest people in the world tend to be men. The most powerful people in the world tend to be men. You might say that's biology, men's natural inclination to seek power and to have ambition. But I would also argue that same thing could apply to white people and black people. You would say, well, white people naturally have all the money and all the power by and large because they naturally have more drive and ambition than black people. But we all know that's not true. Of course, women have been kept out of certain things and there have been barriers put up against them. I don't get why this is controversial to say. Of course, white supremacy and you know misogyny are not exactly the same thing, especially systemic misogyny, because misogyny has existed much longer in human history than white supremacy, which is a recent phenomenon that we're all living under. But there's still a lot of similarities, a lot of overlapping qualities. Gonna jump into the comments before I start reading the book. Nelson Moreno says, don't pay for it. I can send you a link to download from a site, or I can also send you the file. The overwhelming majority of men in the West are not committing DV, but most whites are racist to a certain degree. I would say, of course, most men aren't committing DV, but DV is extreme. Just like most whites joining Stormfront or joining the KKK or joining their local neo-Nazi chapter is extreme. But a lot of white people are implicitly or tacitly racist. A few of them are explicitly racist, but a lot of men are implicitly misogynistic or explicitly misogynistic as well. And it's the implicit men who are misogynistic that uphold the system of systemic misogyny against women. I don't get why that's so hard to understand. I don't get why that's so hard for some men to accept. But this goes to show that the fight against white supremacy is deep, because even as men, as black men, we have struggles trying to understand and have empathy for the other half of humanity, right? The same way the white supremacists, by and large, struggle to have empathy or compassion for another segment of humanity, right? We have to check ourselves. Anyway, continuing here. In the book, we're on page 100, Consequences of Gendered White Supremacy in Real Life. White supremacist rhetoric online can have very real consequences in real life. In the opening to this chapter, I referred to the website that depicted Bonnie Juhari's workplace exploding amid animated gift flames and the real harassment she suffered once her address and phone numbers were published on the site. In this instance, the white supremacist rhetoric also had consequences for Roy Frankhauser, the self-described chaplain to the Ku Klux Klan in Pennsylvania, who terrorized Johari and her daughter. This sort of hate-filled targeting of an individual on the web is part of what appears to be an emerging trend. In a 2007 incident with some striking similarities to the Johari case, a white supremacist from Roanoke, Virginia, with the redundantly appropriate name William White, published the home address and phone numbers of the families of 6 Louisiana high school students known as the Gina Six. What became known as the Gina Six incident started as a racially charged schoolyard brawl in which white youths hung a noose in a tree on school property as a way to warn black youths that the tree was designed as a whites-only hangout spot. A black youth challenged this. White youths retaliated, and several students were injured. The controversy heated up when the black youths were charged with felonies that carried a long prison sentence for attacking a white youth, while the white teens who had targeted their black schoolmates were released on very minor charges that involved no jail time. In addition to using a racial slur in the title of the posting, White also encourages readers to get in touch and let them know justice is coming. In another posting, White is even more explicit about what he is advocating advocating, lynched the Gina Six. As anti-racism protests grew, white supremacists grew increasingly enraged and violent. Retaliation for the anti-racism protests were often expressed in violent, hypermasculine terms, as this quote from a white man posting to the Vanguard News Network illustrates. I think a group of white men with AK rifles loaded with high capacity magazines should close in on the troop of howler monkeys from all sides and compress them into a tight group. And then white men in the building on both sides of this of the shit-skinned hominids shall throw Molotov cocktails from above to cleanse the nigs by fire. This was said by NS Cat, post at Vanguard News Network. Before I continue here, that is a sickening, disgusting comment that this person made right here. And coming from Louisiana, when the Gina Six thing happened, I really didn't pay that much attention to it. I wasn't, that politically, turned up, activated. I wasn't watching the news a lot. I was, getting girls, trying to get fly, hanging out with the homies, rapping and stuff like that. This is actually the first time I've actually got the whole Gina Six thing broken down. And if you're my generation or a bit older, you might be more aware about Gina Six. But coming from Louisiana, I'm actually embarrassed that I didn't know more about the Gina Six case. But it's actually a crime. It's a shame that the black boys got charged with felonies. Meanwhile, the white students who hung a noose on the tree to antagonize their black, schoolmates, ended up walking away with minor crimes on their record, if anything, right? Anyway, that's absolutely a shame, but that sounds right for Louisiana. That tracks right, ticks the box. Continuing here. So, this quote from an online forum reflects the militaristic swagger and tactics of bullying and intimidation that are characteristic of some branches of male dominated white supremacy. The website threatening Bonnie Juhari and her daughter received over 97,000 visits in a 3 year time period. Thus, the internet in both of these instances functions as a mechanism of harassment and as a force multiplier, expanding the reach of that harassment. In the Juhari case, real life harassment followed in the wake of the online harassment, yet local police and the Justice Department declined to file criminal charges against Frank Hauser, citing his First Amendment rights. Eventually, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, under the director of Andrew Cuomo, took action against Frank Hauser in the form of a civil suit that ended in penalties and fines being levied against him. In the Louisiana case, while there were reports that the FBI was investigating William White for the posting that threatened the Gina Six, as of this writing, White has not been arrested or charged with any crime. If William White's threat had occurred in a number of European nations, say Germany or Norway, the targeted families would have had legal recourse under anti-racism laws. More about that this in chapter 7. Consistent with gendered white supremacy, it is relevant to note that in each of these cases, the online harassers were white males. All right, Najas jumped into the comments. He said, Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Wa alaikum salam to you. Very interesting. They brought up Andrew Cuomo. For people that don't know, Andrew Cuomo, I believe, was the governor of New York, but then he got ousted because of, basically sexual deviancy in the office. And I think this goes to nail home something even more, right? This powerful man was allowed to harass women for multiple years, right? And reach very high levels of political office. And it wasn't until very recently when women started gaining more voice through the Me Too movement that Andrew Cuomo was kicked out. But it also goes to show how men can sort of be, how can I say this, step on our own toes, and allies in the fight against white supremacy can end up shooting themselves in the foot, because Andrew Cuomo did a good thing by charging this guy Frank Hauser with civil cases, right? Making him pay for the crime that he did of harassing this, young white woman with a biracial half black, child, by calling her a race traitor, and having people attack her car and her home and stuff like that, having her move across the country and things like that. Andrew Cuomo did a good thing, but because of his rampant sexism, now he's out of power and not able to continue to try to go after these white supremacists that attack people and harass them online and stuff like that. I don't mean to always go back to gender, but it is the title of the chapter, and we will be moving forward. But I'm just going that here. All right, so brother, thank you. You are a real Nelson Mandela. Allah bless you. Oh, I'm not Nelson. I'm not Nelson. Don't put that on me. May Allah make me humble. May Allah give me grace and mercy as well as He does to you. Thank you for the compliment. But yeah, I'm just continuing to learn, read, educate with the people, and chop it up with the people. So thank you, Najash, for that comment as well. All right, and yeah, the name like Najash, a name like continue to do so. Anyway, continuing here. Where are we? So, mainstream news reports suggest there is growing apprehension that this kind of targeted harassment is becoming an all too common practice. In what some have termed cyberbullying, schoolyard bullies use various digital technologies, such as MySpace pages and text messages sent from mobile phones, to target other young people for online harassment. This type of harassment is often based on physical characteristics like size, disability, or age, or social identities, such as gender, sexuality, race, or ethnicity. Initial research in this area suggests that the targets of harassment are most often women and girls, and that the perpetrators of cyberbullying, whether children or adults, tend to be white males. Even without this type of direct, overt harassment, there is additional evidence that of a hegemonically white, heterosexual, masculine culture online. Laurie Kendall argues in her richly nuanced ethnography of the gender dynamics in the multi-user domain, or MUD, Blue Sky, that digital technologies reproduce white, heterosexual, masculine cultures and hierarchies of power. While this is by no means conclusive evidence, the preliminary research does indicate a pattern of white male dominance of online spaces. When viewed in a global context, it becomes clear that the ability of white women, such as Concerned Kaya, White Bread, and Lycia, to create white supremacist web content, whether starting threads, reading and replying to others' posts, or serving as a discussion board moderator, it is at least partly the result of a privileged economic and geopolitical position in which those who live in industrialized nations are more likely to own computers and have internet access than those living in developed societies. This disparity in owning a computer and having internet access reflects a parallel inequality in usage. Together, these have been referred to as the digital divide, quote unquote. Although women still account for less than half of all internet usage in a number of developing countries, globally women are rapidly catching up with increasing rates of participation online, often at faster rates than men. One US based advocate for equal access to technology refers to the digital divide as the civil rights issue of the new millennium. I wonder, was Instagram invented by 2009? Because with Instagram and a lot of social media, I think that pushed more women online, right? By 2009, the most we had was like Facebook and MySpace and stuff like that. um, with Instagram, Twitter, and all these other social media sites, Snapchat, etc., I definitely think more women got online since then. All right. Others take issue with the divide terminology for a variety of reasons. Empirical research indicates that most of the apparent digital divide in the United States concerning computer ownership and internet access originally attributed to gender or racial difference is the effect of class and socioeconomic status more than gender and race. As of 2006 in the United States, internet access has converged between men and women who are white. Thus, white supremacists such as Concerned Kaya, White Bread, and Lycia are increasingly likely to be the online representatives of white supremacy, but just as unlikely to be leaders. Masculinity, the internet, and white supremacy. White men such as Don Black have led the way in the shifting white supremacist movement rhetoric from print to the web. The fact reflects the content, the confluence. Sorry, this fact reflects the confluence of several others: the predominance of white men in leadership positions and organized racism, their dominance as early innovators in the fields of computer programming and internet technology, as well as the continued dominance of elite white men in positions of power in U.S. political institutions and in global capitalism. Given the pervasiveness of white male dominance in capitalism, and in particular in the development of the internet, it is perhaps not surprising that white men within organized racism were among the early adopters of this technology to advance the movement's goals. Continuing here, the internet has a history, geography, and demography grounded firmly in the material realities of gender, class, and race. And these shape the technology and influence over experience of the technology. The collection of digital technologies that we now refer to as the internet began as an initiative of the United States Department of Defense called ARPANET. Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. The architects and early adopters of internet technologies have predominantly been white men. While the accomplishments of African Americans and women across racial ethnic categories have often been neglected, these exceptional individuals are frequently tokens in an otherwise white male domain of computer technology. This white male dominance of computer technology continues. Today, the leaders of both the software and internet related industries and the cultural commentators who write most often for who write most often for mass media outlets about digital culture are predominantly men and exclusively white. The Digerati, a play on the term literati, is a group of industry and cultural leaders appointed by the media, some might say anointed, as spokespeople. To illustrate this point, one list of the Digerati includes 40 names, 35 of which are men, all of whom are white, and most of whom are from the United States. The development of the internet by white men as a communication technology for the military, along with the continued predominance of white men in the elite techno class of both the digital economy and culture, has led some to argue that the internet is inherently masculinist. While many progressive activists, including many feminists, have carved out a space for resistance within this terrain. This debate over gender and technology remains unresolved and reverberates through the racially charged use of the internet. This is one of the privileges of being a man online. You get what I'm saying? Like when you're a man online, you're not, having to navigate certain ways that women have to navigate online. You get what I'm saying? And of course, a lot has changed since 2009. I mean, 2009 to 2024 in internet years is a millennia, right? So a lot has changed. We've had the advent of social media, more smartphones in people's hands. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot more people are connected online. The internet is also becoming less English dominated, though English is still the predominant language, right? A lot has changed, but still, it is a very masculine space, I would say, right? Just think about the amounts of pornography on the internet, right? And a lot of pornography is directed at men, and women are sort of forced to see that when they scroll and be in random spots on the internet, right? Yeah, continuing here. So, while white masculinity informs the online practices of participants at Stormfront and the actions of individuals like Roy Frankhauser, while offline organized racist groups project a sense of hypermasculinity in their militaristic swagger and tactics of bullying and intimidation. Online participatory sites such as Stormfront allow for a variety of expressions of gender and sexuality. Although these new online expressions of white supremacy remain quite narrowly constrained, they simultaneously allow for reinvigoration of the ideology by including participation by white women who espouse liberal feminist rhetoric about equality, by including new interpretations of interracial dating, and by offering limited support of pro white homosexuals. These digital online expressions of white supremacy are embedded in the material structures of gender, race, and globalization. One of the ironies of masculinity in the internet is that even as the technologies reproduce masculine cultures and hierarchies of power, online space also enables women to engage in new forms of contestation. And one of the ironies of white supremacy online is that even as the broadcast television commercial aired touting the internet as a place where there is no race, Don Black and others were working to create Stormfront, a site that ardently advocates for a racist vision. Stormfront is not successful because there is a vast reservoir of pathological individuals ready to be recruited into a white supremacist army, or because innocents are lured into the dangers of the internet. Rather, the forum owes much of its success to the effective development of the white racial frame that goes unacknowledged in the United States, and the site's ability to use that frame to coalesce a translocal whiteness that ignores national boundaries. That is probably one of the most important two sentences in this book. Places like Stormfront, certain segments of X, 4chan poll section. The reason they are not successful is the reason why they are successful is not because there's that many racist crazy people out there, and it's not because some young person went down the rabbit hole one day and just got transformed. It's because of the white racial framing of America in and of itself that allows for this sort of culture to be inculcated in the first place. America has a cultural problem. America has a history that it's never reckoned with, thus causing these individuals to have a white racial frame that can eventually be moved towards the extremes of that frame, right? It's not that complicated, but it actually is profound when you think about it that way, right? Because once again, we are so quick to dismiss the white supremacists and all the racists online as, yep, those are just the crazies. Yep, that's just the white trash. Yep, those are the trailer park methed out cokeheads, that we ignore on the corner. But really, when we look on Stormfront, what are some of the handles? Future lawyer, right? Stormfront has 97,000 visitors per day or something like that, as we've read in the statistics before. You can check me on that if you look at the book. 97,000 people. I doubt all of them are homeless. 97,000 people can't all be in the trailer park. Some of them are cops. Some of them are politicians. Some of them are the guy you work with. And that's not being paranoid. That's just looking at the numbers, right? Millions of people creating this translocal whiteness that expands across borders, across to Europe, across to Asia, across to Latin America, across to everywhere in the world where people are susceptible to these sorts of wicked ideas. If Stormfront were ISIS front, if Stormfront were Al Qaeda front, if Stormfront was, any type of Islamic extremist website where people were constantly typing online the need to bring back the caliphate and the reason for blowing yourself up to get 70 virgins in heaven, that site would be taken down. It will be all over the media. Every politician would speak about why Stormfront is an evil to mankind. But still, we allow this evil, wicked ideology to continue to exist online. Not only online and Stormfront, but now all over social media as well. All right. So Avery Adams says, shaking my head, missing today's appointment, dentist appointment, missing today's show, dentist appointment. It's okay. Playback gang, just press 2X and show love. All right. Anyway, continuing here. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I really want to read. I really want to read that again. Don Black and others were working to create Stormfront, a site that ardently advocates a racist vision. Stormfront is not successful because there is a vast reservoir of pathological individuals ready to be recruited into a white supremacist army, or because innocents are lured in by the dangers of the internet. Rather, the forum owes much of its success to the effective deployment of the white racial frame that goes unacknowledged in the United States, and the site's ability to use that frame to coalesce a translocal whiteness that ignores national boundaries. The white men who have led the white supremacist movement into the digital era, such as Don Black, David Duke, and James Kelso, are not the elite white men who are captains of global capitalism. Yet they are relatively privileged within a global context of economic, gender, and racial inequality. Similarly, white men who have led the innovations of cyber racism are not on a technological or entrepreneurial par with those creative individuals who first conceptualized the internet, but they have translated the white supremacist movement into the digital era in ways that belie the conventional notions that white supremacists are backward and that technological innovations always bring progress. And given that the white supremacist movement remains male dominated despite the great inclusion of women's voices, it is not surprising that white men are the one who translated white supremacy into the digital era. The fact that white men have been the primary innovators in translating white supremacy into the digital era has had important implications for the material lives of women, girls, and those who are viewed as racial others. In this way, the extremist expressions of white supremacy map onto the everyday expressions of white identity. The kind of cyber racist attacks launched against Bonnie Juhari, her daughter, and the young African American men of the Gina Six are the result of white men's use of internet technologies to attack the perceived other. This shares many features of the cyberbullying phenomenon, in which young children labeled other along some axis of identity are targeted for attack online. The emerging research here suggests it is young boys who are most often the aggressors. Taken together, this indicates that white supremacy is inherently linked with white identity, and the internet has been a particularly effective mechanism for furthering the goals of white supremacy. These goals corrode the ideals of equality in a democratic society. Very interesting that white men and young white boys are the ones who are doing the bullying online. But I think also a lot of men in general, but still, but putting that to the side, very funny that people that claim to be the master race act so bitch made online. What type of man writes long hateful messages to another man or to a woman online? Seriously, that's bitch made behavior. That's bitch made behavior, because we know for a fact 99% of the people that post online would not say any of the things that they say online to somebody in their face. How do we know? Because we work with these people, we live with these people. They say, "Hey, buddy," every day, and they don't ever turn up in their in person like they do in the comment section. Anyway, continuing here. So, the people who participate in and create white supremacy online actively shape their identity online in ways that are explicitly racialized, gendered, and to some extent sexualized. The participatory quality of Web 2.0, where everyone creates online content, opens up white supremacist rhetoric in ways that were simply not possible in the print only era. While it is certainly likely that people reading white supremacist newsletters read those in ways that resisted the unintended purpose of the author, the resistance never became part of the publication. The internet, and specifically the participatory form of the internet referred to as Web 2.0, changes so the resistive read of the prevailing white supremacist ideology gets built into the medium. Let's repeat that. The internet, and specifically the participatory form of the internet referred to as Web 2.0, changes that so the resistive read of the prevailing white supremacist ideology gets built into the medium. Basically, they're saying that the society that we have right now in real life translates also online. So if we live in a white dominated society, it's not going to be any different when we enter the matrix, right? When the women of the Ladies Only Forum post responses that resist the views that male leaders of the movement espouse, they are both challenging and reaffirming white supremacist ideology through the medium of the online forum. In this way, the resistive response gets incorporated into the medium and the movement's ideology, and in this way, it is different than movement discourse in print. The women at Stormfront incorporate key elements of white liberal feminism into their rhetoric, thereby expanding white supremacist ideology and making the movement potentially more inclusive to those who hold a range of other political views, along with the shared value in white identity. Thus, the women at Stormfront illustrate that white feminism is not incompatible with key features of white supremacy. By resisting a more male dominated version of white supremacy and articulating a form of white supremacy that is more inclusive and egalitarian along lines of gender, and even allowing for the possibility of a version of equal rights within white supremacy for gays and lesbians, the women of Stormfront illustrate another way in which white supremacy is inherent in white identity. This suggests something troubling about liberal feminism. To the extent that liberal feminism articulates a limited vision of gender equality without challenging racial inequality, white feminism is not inconsistent with white supremacy. Very true, very true. That's a deep ass sentence. Let's repeat. This suggests something troubling about liberal feminism. To the extent that liberal feminism articulates a limited vision of gender equality without challenging racial inequality, white feminism is not inconsistent with white supremacy. Without an explicit challenge to racism, white feminism is easily grafted onto white supremacy and useful for arguing for equality for white women and possibly for white gays and lesbians within a white supremacist context. While there is a slight opening for the acceptance of queer sexuality within white supremacy, the vigilant protection against the perceived threat of miscegenation or transracial heterosexual contact still predominates. Within the context of white supremacy online, miscegenation remains a primary concern, even as the idea of the possibility of gays and lesbians within the movement gains more acceptance. Within this framework, race and notions of racial purity trump sexuality and notions of sexual impurity. This shift towards greater acceptance, although this seems too strong a word, of gays and lesbians also suggests that the participants at Stormfront do not represent a monolithically conservative ideology in which racism, misogyny, and homophobia all line up neatly with the shared belief that the Holocaust was a hoax. Crazy. Instead, the rather more disturbing news is that white supremacists at Stormfront are not as different from many white Americans in their views about gender equality and the acceptance of queer sexuality as we might prefer to believe. Masculinity and whiteness also masculinity and whiteness are embedded in various ways in the internet and in online communication. Race is, as one scholar puts it, like an ever present ghost in the machine of American technology. The emergence of the online community at stormfront.org expresses what may be an authentic human desire for community, yet it is an expression of community that is articulated in ways that rely on the construction of a unified white male heterosexual subject and an explicit discourse of white supremacy. The emergence of a ladies only space provides for some participation by white women at Stormfront, but the very existence of the women only forum speaks to the overriding male dominance of the site and online communication as whole. The use of the internet as a tool for harassment and intimidation by white supremacists like Roy Frankhauser, and more broadly in the culture by cyberbullies who are predominantly white and male, suggests that hate speech online has real consequences on and offline. Both the harassment of Bonnie Johari and the emergence of a ladies only forum at Stormfront illustrate the way that the digital and the material are embedded in each other. In many ways, the online and offline distinctions are false. The digital world is embedded in the material world, and the material in the digital. White masculinity is a feature of internet technology, and white masculinity is embedded in our culture, in our institutions, and indeed in globalization. At the same time that white supremacy operates as a ghost in the machine, quote unquote, the participatory media of sites like Storefront, where users create the content, mean the articulations of gendered white supremacy have opened in new ways that expand the scope of who might be included in such a world. Nelson Moreno jumped in. He said, "My mom threw my weed away by mistake, so I had to leave the stream and talk to a bunch of people. Have you forgiven me, Avery?" Okay. Y'all are crazy. Y'all are crazy. My comment section gets crazier and crazier every day. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna continue here. Um, in the following chapter, I examine the presence of overt white supremacy online and explore the ways the movement rhetoric published in newsletters prior to the digital era has been translated to the web. Then I explore the emergence of a cloaked white supremacy online and the ways some white supremacist groups have taken advantage of the unique features of the web to shift knowledge claims about race, racism, and civil rights. And following that, I offer a brief glimpse at the ways some young people in the United States make sense of these cloaked sites before shifting focus once again to white supremacy in a global context. So that's the end of chapter 5, talking about gender and white supremacy online. Very, very interesting, fascinating. By far my favorite chapter because of the discussion it caused and also ways it made me think. It made me think about the internet in ways I hadn't thought of before, right? That a lot of it is inherently male. Right, that the internet inherently picks up so many qualities from the white dominated society that we live in the real world. Right, we always think about, have you ever noticed on YouTube if you watch a video with a white guy and the captions are auto generated, 99% of it is correct. But if you watch it with a black person, and I've seen this with myself, and I believe I speak pretty perfect English, right? They still mess up the words that I say in the parts of the auto caption, right? That goes to show, right? They probably do a lot more testing with white people or people that put on the quote unquote white voice when they do those sorts of tests with the technology that create the auto dictation for the captions and stuff like that. Anyway, very interesting. We're going to jump to chapter 6, white supremacist discourse in print and online. So going here on Black Brazil today, whitey women just want to smash and dash black men. I like Black Brazil today. Y'all go check out that channel. He does a lot of interesting videos about what it's like to be black in Brazil. I don't know if the guy is Brazilian himself or if he is a black American who moved to Brazil, but nonetheless, his content is fascinating, and I encourage you to check him out. So I want to finish chapter 6 today because I really want to be able to blow through this book. So let's run through chapter 6 and finish up with chapter 7. Then I'll catch y'all on the next stream. Any questions or comments, put them in the chat. All super chats are appreciated. And let's continue. So, Chapter 6, White Supremacist Discourse in Print and Online. We want our website to give an accurate portrayal of the Knights. Most people base their opinions on what we call comic book research. They go to the library and pick up a book written by someone who has his own agenda. They may watch a ridiculous Hollywood movie or watch the Jerry Springer show and then think they are experts on the Klan. Hogwash. Any good researcher goes straight to the source. On this website, we offer our ideas, explanations, goals, agendas, beliefs, etc. for your examination. Straight from the national headquarters of America's largest and oldest Klan organization, the authority on the subject. I want to make this absolutely clear. I believe by the end of this century, we will have a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in America. They will try to rebrand. We saw how they tried to do it with Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes. As long as if they find a way to get a charismatic, non-gay white nationalists who can clean up well and articulate their thoughts well, they will reproduce another David Duke who will be successful, right? To some degree, they've done it with Trump. To some degree, they've done it with Trump. I think it is very likely in America we will see a resurgence of the Klan. No more white hoods or something like that. They might not even call themselves the Klan, but we've seen versions of this with the Tea Party. We've seen we have a version of this now with MAGA as well. I do think we will come back to seeing a sort of like white white cultural based sort of organization that's chauvinistic in its beliefs, right? Anyway, white terrorists are a bigger problem than a Muslim terrorist, quote unquote, says Nelson Moreno, and I would agree. Though white supremacist ideas are permeating among young people the same way radical Islamic ideas do among young Muslim men, unfortunately. Water break. All right, chapter 6 right here. Yes, we're on chapter 6. Let's go. So, in the fall of 1998, I was teaching at a predominantly white suburban Long Island university. Those of us on the faculty who use computers as part of our teaching repertoire were involved in something called the Pioneer Program, which encouraged technological innovation in the classroom. With that encouragement, I scheduled the race and ethnicity course I was teaching for a session in the computer lab. I realize now, in the clear vision of hindsight, a rather vague idea that the students in that class would use the internet to conduct research about topics of interest, and I would help them develop websites rather than the traditional term papers for their final class projects, a pedagogical strategy I would probably not use today. That's because those students are online looking at funny YouTube videos or something like that. Anyway, on the first day of the lab, the class of 30 or so students, all whites, mostly white ethnic from relatively prosperous Italian, Irish, Russian, or Jewish families, and most of whom were first-generation college students, filed into the state-of-the-art computer lab and settled into the high-end office chairs, each one in front of a recently installed PC monitor. I watched in dismay as two of my students began surfing the internet before I could even begin to give my instructions for the class assignment. One of the students was searching for information on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and encountered a cloaked site. I looked on as another student typed the letters kkk.com into the first browser window he opened. This led him to the website for Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, hosted by Tom Robb, quoted in the opening of this chapter. Once at the website, my student laughed and pointed at the screen to share the image with his classmates. Anyway, the story of my experience with my students in that computer lab illustrates a number of themes that I want to address in this and the following chapters about white supremacy online. In this chapter, I focus on the overtly racist white supremacist websites created by those that previously published white supremacist newsletters. My goal here is to offer a preliminary framework for studying social movement discourse in print and online, and specifically to offer a preliminary analysis of how white supremacist movements movement discourse has been translated from print into the digital era. For instance, Tom Robb's printed newsletter, The Torch, was one of those I included in my previous study that examined the movement publications of 5 different white supremacist groups, and it was Robb's website that my student visited in the lab. To date, there has been scant scholarly investigation that compares social movement discourse prior to and after the widespread adoption of the internet. And there is no research, to my knowledge, that offers a comparison of white supremacist movement rhetoric in print and online. According to scholar Les Bach, such studies would contribute to the qualitative understanding of how virtual fascism might relate to its previous media incarnations. In this chapter, I do this by examining how virtual fascism, quote unquote, or what I refer to as white supremacy online, relates to its previous media incarnation in printed material. This analysis is by no means an exhaustive study of white supremacy online, as there is a growing body of literature already that examines this online discourse in interesting and innovative ways. What I want to contribute to this ongoing scholarly discussion is an investigation into what I referred to in the opening chapter as a naturally occurring experiment, quote unquote, based on the coincidence of my earlier research on white supremacist discourse in print, the samples of which ended in 1993, and the timing of the emergence of white supremacy online, circa 1994. As a result of this accident of timing, a unique opportunity for inquiry presents itself. My focus here is on the broadest possible view of the 5 groups I examined in print and their transition to digital media. These 5 groups are the Church of the Creator, COTC, the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, the National Association for the Advancement of White People, NAAWP, the National States Rights Party, NSRP, Christian Identity, and White Aryan Resistance, WAR. I selected these as the sample for my earlier study because they represented a broader I selected these as the sample for my earlier study because they represented a broad ideological spectrum within the white supremacist movement, and while certainly not comprehensive, these groups continue to represent a wide range of perspectives within the white supremacist movement. I am primarily interested in investigating whether or not the 5 groups I studied in 1993 made the transition from print-based newsletter to publishing on the internet by 2007. If they did not make the shift, I wanted to know why. And if they did make the transition, I wanted to know what kind of web presence they have now. That is, if they are online, in what ways are they using digital media? Thus, I organized the discussion that follows according to the ways white supremacists have made use of the internet, from the least to the most successful measured in terms of web traffic. So, 404, defunct white supremacist websites and organizations. In the digital era, an organization without a web presence is barely recognizable as part of a viable global social movement. As a practical matter, a social movement organization without a web presence faces greater difficulty mobilizing social movement resources than a group with a web presence. 3 of the white supremacist organizations that once published newsletters have not made the transition from old to new media because the organizations themselves no longer exist. The COTC, the Invisible Empire of the KKK, and the NAWP do not have websites because their organizations are defunct. The violent white supremacist group Church of the Creator failed in their attempt to exploit the internet to spread their ideology and build their organization. However, 2 of the individuals in those organizations, Tom Robb and David Duke, are active online elsewhere. Going to the comments, Kamal jumped in. He said 100. Shout out to Kamal. We're reading here about white supremacists who in the past had newspapers, brochures, publishing houses, and stuff like that. And then when the internet came, were they able to transition to make it to the next stage of disseminating their ideology? Very interesting stuff right here. And yeah, we're on chapter 6 of this book. So Kamal says Islam is peaceful. Absolutely, Islam is peaceful, but are people peaceful? That is the question, right? But yeah, the topic here is not about Islam. The topic here is about white supremacy. Continuing here. So, if you were to type the URL for the Church of the Creator into a browser window, cotc.com, you will get a 404 message, meaning file not found. The website does not exist. Ben Klassen founded COTC in 1973 and over the next 20 years shaped his own version of white supremacy based on his text, The White Man's Bible. In that text, he formulated creativity, a religion with the worship of the white race as the central tenet. According to Klassen's cosmology, the white race is the nature's highest creation, and white people are the creators of all worthwhile culture and civilizations. From 1984 through 1992, Klassen published approximately 46 issues of Racial Loyalty, a printed newsletter dedicated to spreading his message of RAHOWA, which stands for Racial Holy War. Wow. The publication's tagline, the group's motto, and later a URL. In the late 1990s, COTC was among the most violent and quickly growing groups within the white supremacist movement. In the mid 1990s, Klassen died and Matt Hale took over the organization. Hale had global aspirations for COTC and added world to the name of the group. This was a choice that would later have serious consequences for Hale and his movement. But in the late 1990s, it must have seemed easy and almost inevitable for someone with Hale's ambition to add world to the group's name and web presence, rebranding that Hale believed would connect him with others around the world who shared his views. In 1998 and 1999, Hale began establishing an early web presence for his group by registering several domain names, RAH, Amakar Rahowa, RahoaCreator.com and WCOTC.com, and creating a variety of websites to spread the religion of creativity and the message of white supremacy. However, Hale's communication strategy for his organization was not limited to websites and domain names. All right, Nelson Moreno says Genocide Joe loves foreign Jews more than he loves fellows, his Americans that are black. Yeah, generally I would agree. I mean, the way Joe Biden is, crashing out for the Israelis is crazy. But listen, I'm gonna give anybody here who is listening to my live stream, a way to make $1 million. Write a book. I want somebody to write a fiction book, like a dystopian fiction book, like Hunger Games or something like that, about this this group, this wild religion started by this guy named Klassen. Ben Klassen, he created a religion and he wrote a book called The White Man's Bible. And in it, the white supremacists worship themselves. They worship whiteness as a religion in of itself, and the white people as the supreme people, right? And imagine how different this world would be if this religion caught on, right? Religion is one of the most, once a religion catches on, it's hard to stop it because once people believe in it, it's hard to break down, right? And there are religions that some people hold on to that are very small and cultish and that sort of stuff. Write a story about creativity, this religion spreading all over Europe, spreading all over the world, hell, taking over America, and the wars that would pop up around it. Think of it like the man in the high castle. You get what I'm saying? I'm just throwing out ideas for anybody who wants to, copyright that. I will not keep it. I ain't got time to write that book, but that is a very interesting story. Imagine this white supremacist religion becomes the most popular religion in America or in Europe. How different the world would be, right? If creativity became a state sanctioned religion, like how Christianity was. And once again, this is not impossible, right? Christianity started off as a small Jewish cult for like 200 years until eventually, like, the Romans picked it up, and now it's the biggest thing in the world. Creativity could get picked up, I don't know, 200 years from now, and America becomes this white supremacist nation, right? Or some other small European nation picks up creativity. You get what I'm saying? Very, very interesting. I never heard about this. I never heard about this before. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by that. And another thing, there was another idea I had in my mind, but I might say it later. Going into the comments, Nelson Moreno says white supremacist spaces are similar to fundamentalist religious spaces. I'm literally going to write that. I write for a hobby. That's a great story, man. I'm telling you, Nelson, if you write that story, and you could even write it in Portuguese, they'll translate it in English. Write the story about this religion that gains popularity among a lot of white people, maybe because there's so much immigration into Germany or into the UK, that white people then start picking up this old religion, the white man's Bible, and begin believing that whiteness is sacred and white people are basically descended from angels, whatever you want to put in there, and then write the story about two central characters, one black, one white, who are trying to fight against the system and stuff like that. I don't know. That's a great story. All right. Nelson Moreno's the default president, brain dead, I guess. I will name the white supremacist after you, Simon. Don't do that. Don't do that, Nelson. Don't do that, Nelson. Don't make me the bad guy in the story. At least make me a side character. At least make me that side character that's like, guys, I don't get what y'all are talking about, man. You know, I don't see color. Make me that guy at least. Make it funny. Make me be like the guy who says, "Hey, man, I don't know why we're always talking about racism so much." Make me that guy. That would be great. I would like to do that. Anyway, I'm gonna continue here in the story. Um, for a number of years, Hale crafted a public image as a clean cut, suit and tie wearing boy wonder of American neo Nazism who played the violin and attended law school. In this guise, Hale had a gift for attracting national media attention, both in print and from broadcast television, including the major networks. After he graduated from law school, the Illinois bar blocked Hale's admission based solely on his ideology. And this case gained him a great deal of sympathetic media attention from mainstream news sources like GQ magazine and NBC's Today Show. At the same time that Hale was cultivating his clean-cut public image through the mainstream media, he worked on recruiting followers through face-to-face meetings throughout the United States. When he spoke to small-town library audiences, he savvily modulated his views for maximum appeal. During this time, Hale was also cultivating a violent group of supporters by attending neo Nazi rallies, urging participants to join the cause of white supremacy. Very interesting that he got barred from being a lawyer just because of his very racist ideas, which actually is a good thing that the bar should do. But I think we should do this for every job, because Hale shouldn't be able to just say, well, if I can't be a lawyer, I'll be a police officer then. Right? We don't have these sort of checks on people's ideologies, their beliefs, their internet history, that sort of stuff to verify if people are okay working with the general public. Right? Glad this guy is dead, right? But very interesting about his website, WCOTC, a powerful new religious creed structured for the survival, expansion, and advancement of nature's finest, the white race. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, facts, Jamal Nelson Moreno says in the comments, but I think it's someone else running the show behind the scenes. I think Joe is definitely behind the wheel, running the thing, because I think if Obama was in office, you know, if Obama was in office, what is happening in Israel would not be happening. Like, he would not be sending the billions of dollars, the weapons and stuff like that. I think this is all, genocide Joe's doing, right? Joe Biden said, like, if there wasn't an Israel, we had to create an Israel. And Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And I will fight tooth and nail to defend Israel. And he said, I'm a proud Zionist and stuff like that. I think Joe really, really is rock hard for Israel for some strange reason, and I don't get it. I don't get it. It's weird, weird, weird. But anyway, I'm continuing here. So, from 1999 to 2004, several violent racist attacks were linked to COTC, including the 1999 shooting spree by Benjamin Smith that left 2 people dead and 7 wounded. At first, Hale was able to distance himself from these violent acts. During this time, Hale also became entangled in a lawsuit over the use of the name World Church of the Creator, including his use of the corresponding domain name WCOTC.com. When Hale added world to Church of the Creator, he was infringing upon the name of another group, a religious organization already in existence with no ties to white supremacy. Eventually, Joan Lefkow, a federal judge, ruled against Hale and in favor of the other group of the same name. This apparently enraged Hale and those in his group. Not long after the ruling, Judge Lefkow's husband and mother were killed in brutal attacks in their home. Judge Lefkow was not at home at that time. That's crazy. That's crazy. Earlier in the comments, my guy Kamal said that, Islam is a peaceful religion. But if you were to ask people, general Americans, who do you think more likely is to kill a judge and their family? This Muslim guy right here or this white guy right here? Not telling them that they are, white supremacists or Islamic extremists or anything. A lot of Americans would say, oh, yeah, that Muslim is more likely to kill the judge and his family. Jesus Christ. Yo, the white supremacists are sick. They are sick. That is absolutely sick. Think about that. They lost a civil court case where they just had to change the name of the church. So the white supremacists said, oh, we have to change the name of our church. We will kill your family. Jesus Christ. That is insane. That is insane. All right, I'm sorry. I was just taken aback by that. I did not expect that. All right, Kamal says exactly. Reduce every white racist to a janitor or used car salesman. DL Hughley. Anyway, shout out to DL Hughley, man. That's one person who I like to smoke with before I die. All right, so uh, this apparently enraged Hale and those in his group. Not long after the ruling, Judge Lefkow's husband and mother were killed in brutal attacks in their home. Judge Lefkow was not at home at the time. Hale was arrested, stood trial, and was convicted for soliciting the murder of Judge Lefkow. On April 6, 2005, Hale was sentenced to 40 years in prison for his involvement in the assassinations. As Hale went to trial, it became apparent that few of his former supporters would stand by him, and fewer still were interested in continuing the racist mission on his behalf. Once Hale was incarcerated and his organization was defunct, there was no one left to maintain the site, so COTC's public web presence disappeared. As of 2007, the organization that Klassen founded when he was publishing Racial Loyalty has all but ceased to exist and has no discernible web presence, although a few sites do repurpose some of the COTC rhetoric. So, J.W. Ferens once boasted that his newspaper, The Klansman, was the only publication for the white race that has never failed to publish. The publication did not make the transition from print to digital media. Ha 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 ha. Ferens was the leader of the invisible empire of the KKK and publisher of the Klansman from 1976 to 1992. During those years, he published an estimated 106 issues of the newsletter. In 1993, he lost a civil lawsuit filed against his invisible empire by the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, for the empire's violent attacks in 1987 on civil rights marches in Forsyth County, Georgia. Ferens was ordered by the court to pay $37,500 in damages to the plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit. The settlement with the SPLC prohibited use of the Invisible Empire's name or the publication of their newspaper, The Klansman. Conflicting reports suggest that Ferens has either reorganized his Klan forces under a new name, taken his operation further underground, or abandoned organized racism altogether. While Ferens' Invisible Empire had a long-running print publication, as well as a reputation of being the most violent Klan faction in the United States, neither he nor the group he led has a visible public web presence today. Indeed, there is no evidence that Ferens or his organization ever created a website or had any discernible web presence. Other white supremacists that previously published newsletters have made the transition to digital media, even though their organizations have not. David Duke is a leader. By the way, David Duke is a white supremacist from Louisiana, and we are ashamed of him. We hate him. We hate him as Louisianians. But unfortunately, a lot of Louisianians think like David Duke, even if they disavow David Duke. Continuing, David Duke is a leader in promoting the cause of white supremacy online, yet his organization, the National Association for the Advancement of White People, that's such a funny name. That sounds like a Dave Chappelle skit. David Duke founded the National Association for the Advancement of White People. That's just hilarious. That just sounds like it's meant to be parodied to the upteenth degree, like in all ways possible, right? Like mandating mayonnaise be served for every cafeteria dish across this nation, right? Because we have to protect the interests of white people, right? Anyway, Kamal says Black Klansman. I don't know exactly. Did David Duke appear in Black Klansman? I don't remember. I saw the movie Black Klansman, but I don't remember if David Duke was in it. Either way, uh, Nelson Moreno says whiteys are the real oppressors. National Association for the Advancement of White People. Sonic Ring says yes. David Duke was in Black Klansman. Ah, I forgot, guys. I saw that movie a long time ago. I really liked it, but I don't remember David Duke being in it. All right, David Duke was portrayed in Black Klansman. Okay, thank you guys for reminding me. I gotta watch that film again. That's the only movie Spike Lee won an Oscar for. That's crazy. After all the great films Spike Lee has made, he only won for Black Klansman. Like, that's a shame, right? He was in the end, Sonic Ring says. Okay, okay. Thank you guys for reminding me. I appreciate that. But did anybody hear about the National Association for the Advancement of White People? What would be some things that white people need help advancing for? Because somebody need. All right. We need a Malcolm X movie review. Guys, every time I watch Malcolm X, I cry. Every time I watch Malcolm X, I cry. It's hard for me to watch Malcolm X and give like a unbiased, unvarnished review. It's literally my, uh, you know, Nelson Moreno said something funny. The National Association for the Advancement of White People wants to advance dick sizes. We need, we need a pill to make it longer and wider. Oh God, I need to make my cock longer. I'm done. I'm done. Nelson, advanced self hatred that they project to minorities. All right. That's what got me, Spike Lee. All right. Yeah, Spike Lee won an Oscar for Black Klansman. Yeah. But what are some other things white people need advancement with? Every time I watch Malcolm X, I cry. Kamal says the same thing, man, especially the ending when he died. I love the small details of Malcolm X in the film because if you notice at the end, Malcolm dies with a smile on his face. And in Islam, they say that all the shaheeds, all the true martyrs, when they die, you will see them and they will be smiling and that perfume will come out of their bodies. And I also liked that they showed Malcolm doing the one finger for Tawheed as well when he died. It always gets me. I don't know why. Last time I watched Malcolm X, man, I started crying for real, for real, for real, for real. Man, I can't watch that movie, man. Don't make me do that. Anyway, shout out to Spike Lee. Shout out to Spike Lee. All right, so David Duke is a leader in promoting the cause of white supremacy online. Yet his organization, the National Association for the Advancement of White People, no longer has a web presence. Duke published 41 newsletters for the NAAWP from 1980 through 1991. The it's hard for me to read this and not laugh. The ideology espoused by the NAAWP was couched in the moderate tones of a suit and tie brand of white supremacy, rather than the stridently extremist terms of the robes and hoods. Duke, a former member of the KKK, has transformed white supremacist rhetoric through the NAAWP by advocating for the rights of European Americans in ways that mimicked the language of civil rights. Duke's organization dissolved beginning around 1998 due to internal struggles regarding the organization's ideology and rhetorical styles used to present that ideology to the broadcast media. Duke never resolved those issues with his fellow members, and as of 2007, the former NAAWP website is 404 and now advertises the sale of the domain name. Although his organization and its website are now defunct, David Duke maintains an extensive, interactive personal website, davidduke.com, and actively participates in white supremacy online elsewhere. Duke was among the first white supremacists to embrace the internet as a key to the future of the white supremacist movement. He set out this vision of how the internet could be used by the movement in his essay, The Coming White Revolution, Born on the Internet, originally published online in 1998, about the same time that the NAAWP collapsed and still in the very early days of the internet. Going to the comment section, Nelson says, Whiteys are like the Fremen in Doom. Whitey beat you up, but cry for help at the same time. Man, I don't get how people can get into Doom. I just don't see it. I feel like Star Wars has better lore. Hell, Star Trek has better stories. Dunes is just, I'm trying to get into it, but I can't. I've watched a ton of YouTube videos about it. I watched both movies. I just can't get into Dune. Of course, I see all the symbology, uh, symbolism in it relating to Islam, the Middle East, oil, imperialism, colonialism. I see all of the themes within it, but I'm just not bought in. I don't know, something about it just it's not sucking me in. Pause. You know what I mean? No Diddy. I'm not getting sucked into the Doom verse. Dune verse. It's not for me. I don't get it. Somebody explain the appeal. All right. Continuing here. The examples of the 404 websites and organizations, Matt Hill, COTC, Farron's Invisible Empire, and David Duke's WAWP together illustrate that a prerequisite for any organization hoping to make the transition from print to digital media is the survival of the organization itself. White supremacist organizations disappear because of efforts by activists, such as the legal team at the Southern Poverty Law Center, as in the case of Ferens, or law enforcement officials who imprison the leaders with cause, as in the case of Hale, thus driving the organizations out of existence, as happened to COTC. And they cease to exist because of internal strife and dissension, as with the NAAWP. Whatever the reason for its demise, once the organization is defunct, the website disappears shortly thereafter as well. Isn't it funny? Isn't it kind of ironic? The white supremacists say, oh, black people are criminals, and yet many of the white supremacist leaders go to jail for heinous crimes, like murdering the family of a judge. Well, the white supremacists say, whites have always been the most organized. We've always been together. Whites know how to stick together. And meanwhile, all their organizations fall apart because they can't even agree on basic stuff like whether they can smash big booty Latinas or not. Whether smashing big butt Latinas is miscegenation. They can't even agree on stupid shit like that because their stupid ideology don't even make no sense. Don't even make no sense. Even in the white supremacist organizations where you should have, hypothetically, the most supreme whites, the people who believe wholeheartedly that whites are supreme, all we see within their organizations is dissension, infighting, criminality, sexual perversion, the inability to manage finances, everything that the white supremacists say that black people are, they show within their own organizations. Like they're so fucking stupid. It's insane. It's insane. Anyway, I'm going here to the comment section. Um, so Nelson says, "Did you see the new movies in reference to Doom?" Yeah, I saw both of them, and I'm just not in it. I'm just not in it. Maybe I have to read the books. But the thing about Dune, maybe I don't get into it, is that in the Dune verse, there is apparently a emperor, Emperor Leto, who is half man, half worm, and he has lived for 1,000 years or 2,000 years. And because of the drugs he's taken and the magic within him, he is able to predict the future. And he sort of created all the events, or he predicted the events, or put the events in motion that the Dune verse is in. I hate stories with like a master creator who is like, who planned all of this out. Like that don't make no sense to me. Like I like how in the Star Wars verse, everything is sort of like happening naturally with like this family and their drama, and the force sort of like is in the background. Like there has to be balance in the force is what's said, but the Sith say no, there doesn't need to be balance. The force is just power. But the Jedi say that there needs to be balance in the force. Meanwhile, in the Dune verse, if you really look into the Dune thing, what they say is like, Emperor Leto is running the whole thing. That's really weak sauce to me. I don't feel that. I don't feel that. You get what I'm saying? Uh, go in here to the comment section. Hold on, wait. I'm going to the comment section. Duke is Amilcar Cabral reborn. He is the last messiah for the oppressed. Being called white is extremely embarrassing in 2024. That's my favorite comment. Being called... He said that man called you white. That man said you called me white. I'd rather be called a. I'd rather be called a. God damn. That's funny. Being called white is extremely embarrassing in 2020. I can't. That's funny. That's funny as hell. That's funny as hell. That's funny. Oh, okay. Kamal, that's what passes me. That's what pisses me about passport movement. They're the ones getting us stigmatized. That's what pisses me off. Passport bros are international tricks. The future is not set in the Dune verse, but I'm only in the second book. From my understanding, the Dune verse is all planned out by Leto. Leto planned the whole thing out. That's really weak. That's weak writing to me, in my opinion. I don't know where the Passport Bro thing came up. I didn't bring up anything about Passport Bros, but I will continue here in the text. So, copy paste white supremacist brochure websites. White supremacists Ed Fields and Tom Robb created websites that reproduced their printed publication virtually unaltered. The transfer of text from print to the web is fairly simple using copy paste commands. The set of keyboard commands that allows a user to copy paste text and images from one document or program and transfer or paste them into another. Brochure websites are one way static displays of information controlled by one content creator. The use of brochure sites by extremists such as Tom Robb and Ed Fields to showcase racist propaganda has been a common application of the web. Uh, so, all right, gonna jump here into the comments. All right. All right, I was turning to the white fetish for Latina posts. All right, Kamal jumped into the comments. He said, "Oh, I referenced that the white supremacists can't even agree on whether it's race. If you're being a racial traitor, if you're betraying the white race, if you smash a big booty Latina, because that was one of the things I believe in episode 2 of reading this book. There's this white supremacist who's trying to find a way to keep smashing big booty Latinas while also claiming to be Aryan and pure blood and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know what that has to relate to Passport Bros, but it's still funny. It's still funny because it shows their ideas make no sense. Uh, as far as I know, it was planned by the secret cabal of women for almost a millennia. They failed, so Paul was born. Leto is his son. Okay. All right. Latinos are going to be white. I would argue many Latinos are already white. Uh, Anyway, continuing here. Ed Fields is a white supremacist and publisher of a newsletter called The Truth at Last. From 1978 to 1992, Fields published 102 issues of his periodical. Fields is the founder of the National States Rights Party, a segregationist era organization. J.B. Stoner served as national chairman of the NSRP and was a popular figure among members. In 1983, Stoner was convicted of the 1958 bombing of Reverend Fred Shuttleworth's church in Birmingham. Stoner's conviction and allegations of financial wrongdoing led to the disintegration of the organization in the early 1990s. Yet, despite the dissolution of the group, Fields managed to maintain control of publishing the newsletter and remained throughout the 1990s, one of the busiest networkers on the far right, frequently attending rallies, conferences, and other face to face events organized by white supremacists. In 2003, Fields, once established in the late 1990s, it appears that the site has never been updated. This is evident from a couple of places on the site, including the homepage that he has not changed since the site went up and reads, "Now in our 39th year." Primarily, Fields uses the site to appeal for funds by selling back issues of and current subscriptions to the print version of The Truth at Last. In fact, a full half of the main page is taken up by the text advertising the subscription rates. 1 year subscription costs $18, 6 month subscription $10, 4 month subscription $6, with an assurance that this quote newspaper is mailed in a plain sealed envelope, unquote. So yeah, this is a website, but this book definitely needs to be updated because, going to these brochure sites is not how people are interacting or experiencing white supremacy online now, but it's still good to learn the history of how these things sort of evolved and changed and stuff like that. Because hell, if these things weren't published online, people wouldn't have the information they need to make their silly memes that they post on 4chan and post on Twitter and stuff like that. So continuing here. Visitors to this site can also access Fields' particular version of white supremacist ideology, which includes denial of the Holocaust, references to the threats of supposedly unrecognized Jewish control of media, banking, and government, expounding on the perceived threat of civil rights advances like integrated housing and non discrimination laws, and the corruption of mainstream white politicians who are complicit in allowing this state of affairs to continue unchecked. On the web, this ideological content is unchanged and nearly indistinguishable from the discourse contained in Fields' print publication. All right, going to the comments here. Nelson Moreno says, I started to learn about Islam because of Dune. Black people need these types of mythological stories in the books to increase cultural power. You know, as a black person who converted to Islam because of Islam's ideological, stance on anti-racism, I believe that Islam was the first explicitly anti-racist ideology that gained prominence in the world. Very motivational for me to join Islam. But I do not think that, you know, I used to think the Malcolm X approach, that Islam was the way for black Americans to gain some dignity and also be a part of a global community that is anti-racist. But there is no community that has more anti-black racism in it, other than the white supremacists in America, than the Arabs and a lot of and many sections of the Muslim Ummah. From my travels and from my experiences, it is a big problem in the Muslim world, the anti-blackness within it. Islam, in and of itself, is not um, uh, the cure to fighting white supremacy. Because if you talk to many of the Muslims around the world, many of them who claim that they follow the words of the Prophet and all that sort of stuff, when it comes to actually fighting against anti-black racism and injustice within the Muslim world, they just say, "Oh, in Islam we don't see color." Or they say in Islam, our prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had a black friend 1,400 years ago. Therefore, there is no more racism in Islam because one Arab man had a black friend 1,400 years ago. It's so goddamn ridiculous. Talking to Muslims today about anti-blackness is like talking to some of the worst and hard-headed and thick-skulled white supremacists in Alabama. You get what I'm saying? Because a lot of them really have a lot of their stuff in their minds concerning us and the erasure of us. I should put this down on paper and I really should write about it in more detail. But the thing is, a lot of Muslims today, when you ask them about racism, they just say, "We don't see color. We don't see color. We don't see color, my brother. We don't see color." But they do not care about all the anti-black racism around them because why? They do not see color, brother. I do not see color. Let me tell you about Bilal, brother. Let me tell you about Bilal. Let me tell you about our prophet's friend Bilal 1,400 years ago. And let me tell you also why I will not let my daughter marry a Zanj or an Abd. You get what I'm saying? It's so annoying. The Muslims are some of the worst, especially in the Muslim Ummah right now. So, being a black Muslim is okay if that's really what you want to do. But I've become extremely disillusioned by the idea that Islam is actually as anti-racist as it needs to be. Okay, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'm going to continue here in the book. It is also clear from the site that Fields does not maintain it or even go online, as the text on the contact page says that Dr. Fields is not online. To communicate with Dr. Fields or for inquiries about book orders, etc., please use the U.S. mails. It then lists his P.O. box. If Fields had been digitally inclined, he might have used his famed networking skills to great advantage for the white supremacist cause. As sociologists Barry Wellman observed, computer networks are social networks, and the internet working capabilities of the web could have solidified and expanded Fields' face-to-face contacts in white supremacist organizations. There are several indicators that Fields' web presence has been constructed for him by someone else. The URL for Fields' web presence is stormfront.org truth underscore at underscore last, which indicates that Fields does not own his own domain name and that his website is in fact a subdomain of or a page within another white supremacist website. In addition, the reference to Dr. Fields in the third person, along with the indication that he is not online, suggests someone else is writing the content and that Fields is not the creator of the site. Yet it so closely follows the script of his printed newspaper, the site clearly represents his perspective. In this case, it is very likely that the actual copy and paste commands were executed by someone else on Ed Field's behalf. Having a web presence created by someone else is not the same as creating content of one's own, but the fact that someone else assisted with the transfer of the truth at last from print to digital media does not alter the fact that Fields is the author of the site, and it reflects his vision of the truth, quote unquote. This highlights the difficulty in assessing authorship on the web, and it points to the fact that web authorship, even of a brochure site, is often a collaborative endeavor. Go into the comments here. In France, the Arabs say, "Black men forever my brother, but never brother-in-law." Hey, that makes sense. That's the Muslim Ummah today. That's the Muslim Ummah today. That is the mentality of a lot of the Muslims. And it's not just about interracial marriage, it's simply about acknowledging the different aspects of black life that exist today in the history of black people within Islam. right? You will not find any. You will not find any. You will not find any Arab Muslim country that openly teaches its citizens or mandates its citizens learn about the brutal Arab enslavement of black people that existed for hundreds of years, longer than the Middle Passage transatlantic slave trade. You will not find any active country other than Tunisia that we learned about that actively has laws on the books that says anti-black discrimination in these countries needs to stop. In every single Arab Muslim country, there are large amounts of the black minority that live there. 2 million black people live in Iraq, and they have zero political representation, zero economic mobility. Does that sound like Islam came to eradicate racism when in every single nation you go within the Muslim world that has a substantial amount of black people, they are at the goddamn bottom? No, no. Islam inherently within itself, within the words of a very great man, the man that I admire, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, great man, and I'm sure his black friend Bilal made him seem like a very better person, right? But we're not going to let one Arab man having a black friend 1,400 years ago let the Arabs and the Muslim world in general get away with calling black people Zanj and Abd and trying to relegate to the back of dusty history books the truth about the Arab slave trade and the abuses black people have suffered under Islam. Right? I've said it all clear. I've said it all clear. But say la vie. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that. Continuing here. So, Tom Robb is a minister with the in the Christian identity branch of the white supremacist movement and a member of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, although a different branch than the Farrars led. Robb published approximately 33 volumes of his newsletter called The Torch from 1977 to 1991. Robb owns the domain names for two related sites, kkk.com 1998 to 2000, no site active from 2001 to 2007, and kkk.biz 2004 to 2007. See figure 6.3 and 6.4. The first site is one where he maintains a fairly active online presence with periodic updates. The second site, .biz, is a site that Robb uses to sell KKK themed merchandise. For example, mugs, caps, t-shirts, and keychains. Robb was another white supremacist who was an early adopter of the internet. His first website went up in 1998. While the site design and layout have changed somewhat since then, his sites still retain many of the characteristics of the text and imagery of the torch. Robb's version of white supremacy favors rather aggressive Americana and Confederate iconography, such as the top banner that includes images of the Capitol Dome, the American flag, Mount Rushmore, and the Confederate flag. The advance in digital media that Robb has over other brochure sites, such as Fields's, is that he has added some multimedia content, including digital video and audio. Despite this content, the site remains a brochure that reproduces the torch entirely copied and pasted onto the web. All right. So here is an image of this guy's website here. Welcome to the Knights Party. Please click here. Not a very attractive looking website, but this other site here, this looks like foxnews.com. This looks like foxnews.com. This looks like you're going to see Laura Ingram's picture on this thing. Like, this is like somewhat an attractive website to a certain demographic, to a boomer demographic. This looks like a Trump mass email. This looks like the banner for a Trump mass email. Like, yeah, very similar. Very similar. Water break. All right. So the copy paste brochure sites of Tom Robb and Ed Fields illustrate a rather literal transition of white supremacist rhetoric from print to digital media, and neither are particularly artful or sophisticated adaptations of the available technologies. If the 404 sites were the least successful in terms of the transition from print to digital media, these copy paste sites are at least more successful than those when measured in terms of web presence and web traffic. While it is not possible to measure traffic separately for Fields' site because it is a subdomain, the web traffic of Robb's site is markedly lower than that of Tom Metzger's resist.com. So, C3, the quasi private web. For a committed extremist, the internet has been useful for showcasing racist propaganda and for what Michael Wine refers to as communication, command, and control. C3, quote unquote. The distinction here between the capacity for public showcasing and the ability to communicate in quasi-private ways through chat rooms, email lists, and encrypted and/or password-protected web spaces highlights what many commentators have noted are the limitations of using monolithic terms like the internet or the web or even cyberspace. In fact, there is not just one web, but rather multiple forms of communication media contained under the umbrella term, some of them public and some of them quasi private or altogether anonymous. Tom Metzger, a former Ku Klux Klan leader, a television repairman by trade, and a one time candidate for Congress, both showcases and exercises private use of the internet at his website, The Insurgent. He is one of the few that has renamed his website in the transition from print to web. Metzger's former print media incarnation was called WAR, an acronym for White Aryan Resistance. Metzger broke with the Klan when he formed WAR in 1983 and developed a more radical analysis of political economy than the KKK and dropped any reference to Christianity. To spread the message of war, Metzger created both print and broadcast vehicles. The War newsletter, a cable access television show called Race and Reason, quote unquote, and a radio broadcast. All these media are now showcased and available via The Insurgent, resist.com. The website includes position statements on a variety of topics, including immigration, international conflicts, most often involving Israel, homosexuality, and women. Prominently featured on the website is a link to purchase Aryan branded merchandise, t shirts, caps, keychains. The merchandise page includes the use of some forms that require a user login, but to actually place an order and the end user has to print out and mail in an order form with a check or money order. Aside from these forms, most of the website's features are primarily static, functioning only as one way transfers of information. I finally remembered what I wanted to say earlier, and this is when I was talking about the Church of Creativity, the crazy white supremacist cult. I wanted to say one of the most fascinating things for me when I analyze the white supremacists is their debates, their internal debates about Christianity, on whether whites and white supremacists in general should be Christian, because there is a segment of them that says, "Wait, there was a Jew a long time ago who was brown, who lived in the Middle East and told us to love our enemies and that all of us are created the same and that we need to treat people with dignity and respect and nobody is better than anybody else in the eyes of God." That sounds like Jewish trickery, as what the white supremacists would say, because they're all unified in their hatred of Jews, right? So yeah, there's one segment that says that, but then there's another segment of the white supremacists that says Christianity was originally that brown Arab whatever religion that did come from a Jew, but Jesus was white, and now Christianity has turned into the white man's religion because Christianity allowed white people to be able to do so many things around the world. Without Christianity, white people would have never been, motivated to Christianize the pagans in North America and South America. They would have never had the impetus to all unify together to fight back the hordes of the Turks and the Arabs who wanted to invade Europe and stuff like that. It's a very interesting dialectic amongst the white supremacists regarding Christianity. I find that endlessly fascinating to some degree. To some degree, just reading their debates amongst each other when I go on 4chan or on Twitter and stuff like that, and I see the memes. One of the funniest memes I saw was like, basically, painting Jesus as this brown Jew with a hook nose who was telling the white Europeans, like, love thy neighbor and stuff like that. And meanwhile, the white man he's talking to is like right next to a brown guy or something like that. They're very, very funny. They're very funny memes amongst the white supremacists when they debate Christianity. As far as I'm concerned, they can all go to hell, and all of them will go to hell if hell is a real place. But fascinating that they, have that debate amongst themselves about whether whites should be Christian or not. Continuing here. Much of the content on Metzger's website is unique to the digital media environment and was never available in printed form, although there is some overlap between his print and web incarnations. A noteworthy and unique to the web feature of his site is an array of hate filled computer games. See Figure 6.5. These games, with names like Drive By 2, where players can experience what it is like in the ghetto, African Detroit Cop, and Watch Out Behind You, Hunter, situate gamers as shooters in the convention of video games. In Metzger's racist and homophobic version of these games, players are instructed to shoot the F words before they rape you. In the game called Border Patrol, with the tagline, "Don't let the spics cross our border," gamers are encouraged to shoot the you heard me the first time. The game allows individual users to download and play the game on their own computers. In addition to being violently racist and homophobic, the computer games are also deeply gendered in ways that are consistent with the more mainstream games. That is, the games socialize boys into misogyny and exclude girls from all but the more stereotypical roles. Research clearly demonstrates that adolescents are more likely to play games than adults. Among adolescents, boys are more likely than girls to be gamers. Adolescents are also significantly more likely than adults to say that violence is their favorite part of gaming. Metzger's has included these computer games on his website to appeal to his core audience, young white males. However, Metzger's computer games are crude bits of gaming code that barely adhere to standards in gaming and seem unlikely to meet the minimum standards of sophisticated gamers who have grown up playing EverQuest, Mortal Kombat, or Grand Theft Auto. Jumping into the comments here, Nelson Moreno says the value that type of power, so they value that type of power so much because they feel weak. It's like when people join gangs, they're sad, lonely, and many times ignored or abused at home. I do think that is a big motivating factor for many of the white supremacists to join their sick groups. Continuing here. Without an evaluation of his internal website statistics, which are not publicly available, it is impossible to know how popular Metzger's racist games are. There are some indications these games have been unsuccessful in reaching a wider audience since he recently removed them from the site. Visitors to the site are also invited to sign up for a listserv and to get an email address with an @resist.com suffix, hosted by Metzger himself. This type of feature points to the quasi-private web technology of email list serves, password protected web spaces, and encrypted communication. There are only quasi private because the privacy used in these sorts of communication tools is easily breached. Sorry, zoomed out. Let me zoom back in. Using the touch screen here. Hold on. Oh no, I can't zoom in. Let me try to refresh the page. We're on page 124. Let's do that. All right. 124. Here we go. All right. All right. So these are only quasi-private because the privacy used in these sorts of communication tools is easily breached. And I use this term to distinguish these modes of internet facilitated communication from the World Wide Web. It is this use of encrypted internet technology that Michael White refers when he speaks of the communication command and control used by extremists and terrorists. The capacity of the internet to facilitate relatively inexpensive means of communication between and among people in dispersed geographic regions of the world is certainly one of the primary benefits white supremacists see in the medium. Further, the fact that this communication can be encrypted and anonymous is appealing for many white supremacists, although certainly not all, such as Metzger, who clearly relishes the spotlight. At the same time, that anonymity is appealing for some. Networked communication also reinforces translocal whiteness, that is, a form of white identity not tied to a specific location, but reimagined as an identity that transcends geography and is linked via a global network. The idea of quote unquote command and control control is based on a military style of leadership in which a designated authority figure commands and controls troops or followers. While encrypted communications may provide the capacity for using the communication technology for command and control purposes for groups with a cohesive and ideological vision and a clearly stated goal, this does not accurately describe white supremacy online as a whole. The reality is that the potential destructive force of command and control is mitigated against by significant fissures in the movement along ideological, often religious lines. Metzger's split with the KKK over religion was no small matter within the movement, and religion is still a hotly contested issue that countervails the power of the communication technology to unify social movements, as discussed in Chapter 4. The command and control model is further weakened by the strategy of leaderless resistance advocated by other white supremacists. Metzger describes the philosophy behind the insurgent this way: the insurgent is a network of highly motivated white racists. Each person is an individual leader in his or her own right. The insurgent promotes the lone wolf tactical concept, made up of individual and small cells. Each insurgent associate serves the idea what's good for the white European race is the highest virtue. Whatever is bad for the white European race is the ultimate evil. Each associate works at whatever his or her talents allow. And the original emphasis. Yeah. And that's from resist.com/audio HTM. The notion of a leaderless resistance in which small covert cells acting independently work toward one shared political goal has been popularized by another white supremacist, Louis Beam, louisbeam.com, and widely adopted within the movement. The strategy of leaderless resistance has been widely popular among extremists beyond white supremacists, including extremist environmentalists and Islamic jihadists. The actions of Timothy McVeigh, the white supremacist who bombed the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, are perhaps the best known examples of leaderless resistance in the white supremacist movement. The presence of quasi private hate speech online and the sort of overt hate speech that Metzger showcases is disturbing because of the potential it has for translating into violent attacks. Measured in terms of web traffic, Metzger has been the most successful in making the transition from print to digital media of the 5 groups I examined in print. Yet Metzger's web presence is a distant second to the giant in the field of white supremacy online, stormfront.org. So, virtual community, white pride worldwide. The white supremacist internet portal and virtual community at stormfront.org, discussed in the previous chapter, represents a qualitative shift in the internet and the greatest success for white supremacy online. Don Black founded Stormfront in November 1996 and established it as a simple brochure site that explained his views on white supremacy. Since approximately 2002, David Duke has also participated actively at Stormfront. He and Don Black host a weekly online radio show or audio broadcast that is available through the website, both live, available to anyone at the site, including guests, and in archived downloadable format, available only to registered users. In addition, a number of other white supremacists prominent in the print era, such as Ed Fields and Tom Robb, also maintain a web presence at Stormfront. Fields through his brochure website, which is hosted there, and Rob through a weekly audio address. As with other forms of promotional marketing online, having a recognizable brand will attract participants. For people who are fans of David Duke, knowing that he posts and reads regularly at Stormfront may encourage them to spend time there if they think they might have the opportunity to interact with someone that they respect and admire. The central feature that makes Stormfront.org qualitatively different from other efforts at white supremacy online is that it has adopted the technological features that characterize Web 2.0 and that it allows the kind of interactive member participation and content creation highlighted in the analysis of the ladies only forum discussed in the previous chapter. By opening up his web space for participation, Don Black, along with the senior moderator Jamie Kelso, has built something exceedingly rare on the internet, a successful successful virtual community. Virtual community, a term popularized by Howard Rheingold, describes the complex set of relationships between people who hang out online and sometimes meet face to face as well. This is a fairly complicated social phenomenon, and while it is widely regarded as a new one, there are historical antecedents in other media. For example, Benedict Anderson describes how national newspapers of the print only era contributed to the development of national and regional consciousness among early nation states. Barry Wellman was the first sociologist to study the internet version of virtual communities with his Community Liberated study in 1979. More recently, sociologist Peter Kalloch, among several other scholars and writers, has set out various rules, guidelines, and principles for how virtual communities work and what makes some successful and others not. Mike Godwin, for example, suggests 9 principles for how to make online communities work, admonishing us to use software that promotes good discussion, quote unquote, to not impose a length limitation on posting, quote unquote, to front load your system with talkative, diverse people, quote unquote, and to provide a space for kids, quote unquote. Kalloch's understanding of why people participate in online communities includes a sense of efficacy, reciprocity, and recognition that their participation yields. Mark Smith adds another motivation, which is significant for the analysis here: a sense of community. The quest to understand virtual community is motivated, at least in part, by a desire for commercial profit by US based entrepreneurs. What research by sociologists and attempts by marketers clearly demonstrate is that a successful online community is increasingly difficult to achieve. This makes the success of the virtual community at Stormfront an all the more compelling example of white supremacy online. Online communities are often formed around a common interest or purpose. In this instance, people that seek out Stormfront are looking for others who share a belief in the value of whiteness as a distinct and inherently superior racial identity. Unlike the white supremacist brochure sites described earlier, the registered users at Stormfront can post opinions, read responses from others, then post more feedback from all to read. The potential for dialogue is built into the software, and indeed, without this user created content, there would be nothing at the site to read. Stormfront uses a software program called V Bulletin. A standard off the shelf software that facilitates online discussion. The software is not free, but it is relatively inexpensive, $85 to $160, compared to newer, more feature rich software used by online communities. The V Bulletin software is a widely used commercial software package for online communities, and a number of corporate enterprises use it, including Sunset Magazine and Macworld. The fact that commercial ventures use this software to facilitate their online communities contributes to the normalization of Stormfront as an online community. If a user is accustomed to visiting one of these commercial sites and then seeks out or stumbles upon the V Bulletin interface at Stormfront, the site appears as legitimate as any other forum the user has encountered online. Jamie Kelso joined Stormfront in approximately 2003 and transformed the virtual community. He pushed for leading white supremacist movement leaders to start posting. Furthermore, Kelso is an expert online community manager who seems to be well versed in the principles that contribute to successful online community. Kelso regularly moderates the boards at Stormfront and often initiates innocuous threads to encourage people to join the conversation. Softball questions include: where is your home? Or what inspired your screen name? Discussed in Chapter 5. This is a reliable strategy for getting lurkers to move from passive to active engagement. By asking a question that nearly everyone has an answer to and nobody minds sharing, people may feel more at ease de-lurking and posting a response instead of just reading. Kelso also brought emoticons, smiley faces to Stormfront, added a feature to recognize members' birthdays on the main entry page, and created essay contests with $2,000 scholarships for white kids. Emoticons allow for a greater range of personal expression. Birthday celebrations enable people to build relationships with each other, and contests draw at registrations and participation. Kelso's initiatives in the area of online community have paid off rather spectacularly for Stormfront in terms of number of registered users. In January 2002, Stormfront had 5,000 registered members. A year later, membership reached 11,000. A year after that, in early 2004, it had 23,000 members. By January 2005, membership hit the 42,000 mark and climbed to 52,000 in June 2005. Since then, it has more than doubled to over 129,000 registered users. To put these numbers into perspective, I again employ the comparison to MoveOn.org. Their tagline is Democracy in Action, which claims to have 3.2 million members at their site. Yet there is no virtual community dedicated to civil rights and racial equality that has a reach anywhere near Stormfront's. So I learned a lot right there, and I might implement some of these things that Stormfront does on my channel. Right, very interesting as well. And this is why I'm reading this book, because white supremacy online seems to be very much community based. And while these other websites like MoveOn.org or other big YouTubers might have big platforms, they don't have active communities built around their ideas. I can't think of one place online, maybe the Kali in the higher learning section, maybe that's dead, that you could find a group of people dedicated to civil rights. Maybe in Lipstick Alley, to like the black empowerment section and stuff like that. Maybe you could find that community, but there's no community online dedicated towards civil rights and anti-racism. But when it comes to hating other groups of people, yep, the white supremacists have plenty of community spaces, and Stormfront.org did a lot of great things here. I learned a lot from this last part about how Stormfront grew their membership, and I really will start to try to implement some of those things on my channel too. But anyway, I got to wrap it up here because I have class I need to get to. But we got a lot of reading in today. We made it to page 128 from 100. We're going to start here in our next class live stream session, understanding white supremacist groups transition to digital media, and then we'll finish up this is chapter 7. Wonder how many pages are left on chapter 7. I'm so mad. No, this is chapter 6. This is chapter 6. I wanted to finish up chapter 6 and make it to 7, but I just don't have the time. Ain't that a shame? But yeah, in our next class, next live stream, next session, we'll finish up chapter 6, then make it to chapter 7, cyber lies, cloaked websites, and yes. So I want to say shout out to everybody who turned up for this live stream. It was a very interesting live stream, very good, very informative. A lot of interaction, a lot of comments from the people. I'm going to say shout out to Nelson Moreno, shout out to Kamal, shout out to Sonic Rings, and shout out to Najosh as well. My name is Simon Hill. Y'all be easy and peace.